All right. Hello, everyone. I see that attendee number climbing, so I'm going to go ahead and give everyone just a moment to get settled. Welcome. Thank you all for spending your Monday evening with us, and happy International Women's Day. All right. Welcome to another session of the Ultimate Gap Year Crash Course, How to Choose a Gap Year Program. This is our second session on this topic. We're so excited to be hosting you tonight. Just a note for everyone that this webinar is being recorded and it will be shared with all pre-registered participants. So you will receive a link to this recording in the email. But thank you all for joining us live tonight and hopefully coming prepared with questions as well. While we wait for a few more people to trickle in, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Jessica Beatty, and I'm the Community Manager and Event Coordinator for Go Overseas and USA Gap Year Fairs. We've been running Gap Year
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly jumping in just to make sure. I think Jessica may be frozen. Can you guys see us? Yes. Okay.
browse articles and guides and find scholarships. So there we go. This is a view of our homepage there. So speaking of scholarships, we're super excited to announce that we are currently offering our biggest gap year scholarship opportunity yet. So if you all want to go ahead and open your chat box, you can do that at the menu at the bottom of your screen. We're going to be dropping lots of links in there for you tonight. So here's the link to the scholarship. It is open to all US citizens between the ages of 14 and 25 who are planning to take gap time in the next 12 months. We're giving away one $10,000 grand prize scholarship as well as a $5,000 second prize scholarship. And both awards also include mentorship from one of our accredited gap year counselors, like the 3 counselors that we have here on the call tonight. If you are eligible and if you are seriously considering gap time, I would strongly recommend opening that link right now, filling out the first page. It takes about 30 seconds and getting started on this opportunity to win $10,000. Moving on, a couple other resources that we have. In addition to this crash course, we have just 2 fairs left, one of them this Saturday. So if you would like to join us for our National Virtual Gap Year Fair this Saturday, I'm going to drop that link to register in the chat for you now. We do strongly encourage everyone to attend at least one fair in addition to the crash course sessions, as this is a really good opportunity to meet with program providers and have a chance to ask your questions face to face. It's a fantastic resource, and we're also adding an additional +1 bonus point for anyone who's applying for the scholarship. You get a bonus point for attending a fair in person as well. Quick note on questions today. We will end this session with a Q&A. So if at any point today you have questions for myself or for any of our lovely panelists, you can submit questions through the Q&A box in the menu at the bottom of your screen. Submit at any point today. So speaking of questions, we're going to go ahead and introduce our lovely panelists for the day. First, we will hear from Julia Rogers, who is the founder of En route Consulting. Julia has more than a decade of gap year advising under her belt and is accredited by the Gap Year Association as an expert gap year counselor. She empowers students to maximize the power of their gap time by working with them to design plans tailored to their personality, goals, and budget. Julia spent her gap year in Tanzania and has conducted gap year program site visits in 25 countries. She's a recent TEDx speaker, President Emeritus of the Gap Year Association, and co-hosts a podcast called Gap Year Radio. We'll also hear from Jason Soroyan, who was inspired by his own gap year experience conducting conservation research in Africa to pursue a career in the experiential education industry. As a program leader designing curriculum and leading tours, a program director organizing immersion travel around the world, and now an accredited gap year counselor and co-founder of J2 Guides, Jason knows the industry inside and out. And finally, Kate Warren is a full-time director of research and an accredited gap year counselor. She has worked alongside Holly Bull at the Center for Interim Programs for 21 years. Over the course of her tenure, Kate has counseled nearly 2,000 students, and she has spent significant time researching and assessing the quality of gap year programs. In addition to her work at Interim, she has served on the GYA Research Committee as well as presented at a GYA annual conference, sharing her expert advice on performing due diligence while looking at gap year program websites. So as you can see, this is a fantastic panel of experts who are all here and really excited to help you figure out how to choose the best gap year program. And with that, I will pass it on to the experts. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you to everyone who's attending tonight. Wow, it's just amazing to hear my colleagues' bios and just be present with how much information and experience we have on the call tonight. It's incredible. Just this is an amazing amount of gap year experience that's going to be coming at you and informing this conversation. And tonight's conversation is all about how to choose a gap year program. Once you've established that gap year is the right idea for you, and once you've established a bit more about what your timeline is and what your budget is, it gets down to beginning to select programming or organizations and making connections with individuals in the US and all around the world. And that process can both take quite a bit of time as well as a lot of energy. And so tonight we want to lay a groundwork for you, not only of the macro 30,000 foot view of what you should be looking out for, but also strategies for doing research. And also one of the probably most important things, which is the ability to be able to distinguish between types of experiences and the level of support versus independence that they're going to offer. And my colleagues, Kate and Julia, are going to do an amazing job on those two arenas. So let's just start with an important question, which is before you choose any activity in your gap time, understanding your motivation of what that activity is going to provide for you, what benefit it's going to offer, what learning and growth-based experience is probably the first step for each individual. It's very common that students who are taking gap time, whether you've recently graduated from high school, you're in your college years, you've graduated from school, or maybe you went directly on into your adult life in the working world and you're taking this time now. When you're looking at this, you really want to establish your why. Why am I taking this time and what is it that I'm hoping to get out of it? Most students do end up taking between 3 to 5 different experiences over the course of, say, 9 to 12 months, if you've got that much time. And so each of those experiences could either offer you a very pointed, focused glimpse into an interest or an area of the world or a way that you want to experience an opportunity, or it might actually pursue along the lines of a thread, say, for example, mechanics or engineering or musical theater, that each of the subsequent experiences will build upon. So there's a lot of different ways that you can go about planning your gap time. When you're asking the question why, it's really important to understand for yourself, what skills do I already have? What are the areas that I really want to grow? And what are the best opportunities that are going to balance the level of support I need to be successful, but also a level of independence that's going to allow me to actually take the reins and manifest this gap time feeling very empowered. And a little later on, Julia is going to go over types of experiences, and she's going to help enunciate what opportunities might offer that balance between that support versus independence. When you're thinking about taking gap time, we really encourage young adults to dream big. I know it seems like the idea of climbing a large mountain out in the Himalayas might be far-fetched, or the idea that you might be living alone in another city on your own, holding down a job or a really important internship might feel far-fetched, or the idea that you could be living in some small village or community on your own, helping to support an amazing grassroots community initiative might feel far-fetched now. But know that lots of gap year students work their way into those bigger, kind of higher level skill sets and responsibilities. So by the end of your gap time, you very well could be taking those on. So don't limit yourself now at this step. Really try and dream big. Once you've begun assessing and establishing your whys for each of the experiences that you're going to tackle, it's important to know the needs that you're going to have to help you feel successful while you're there. And at J2 Guides, we tend to call those filters. So what are some examples of some filters? Well, a filter might be, do I need to be in proximity of internet and communicating with my family? Or do I feel more comfortable or comfortable enough being disconnected? Do I need to, like Jason, be active physically every single day and have space and time for myself to go move my body because that's just really good for my brain? Or is it okay if I'm in a structured program where I don't have a lot of personal free time, that I can pursue those kinds of physical activities or reading or writing poetry or journaling? It's important to know what you need for yourself that's going to keep you healthy and well. Are you a person who prefers urban environments? Are you someone who really likes to be out in the wilds and in rural settings? How do you want to push yourself? Are you an urbanite who wants to actually be more comfortable in rural settings? Are you someone who grew up out in the backcountry and wants to get better at using the subway and finding your way around on public transport and being in a busy kind of crowded landscape? These are all really important filters to take into account while you're thinking about the gap year activities that are going to be right for you. Also, lots of students will find that an experience that's one that's more founded, say like in a residential setting, one where you get to know a landscape really well, maybe it's a farm, maybe it's a retreat center somewhere, really gives you a chance to know all of the people who are a part of that community. Whereas more of a travel-based experience will allow you to see much more and have a bigger breadth of experience, whereas you wouldn't be able to go as deep either with some of the relationships with smaller communities, or with kind of just the landscape itself. All of these are important considerations, and thinking about what filters are going to help you succeed is an important step in choosing a gap year program or experience for yourself. And then finally, as we begin thinking about budget and we think about money, money is oftentimes the big resource that parents are focused on and gap year students are focused on. But all of us have many other resources in our lives. There are many wonderful people that we know or that our family members know. Maybe your mom has a colleague who works in another city who could offer you an internship. Maybe you have a family member somewhere who could offer you a couch to stay on, or their kid's bedroom because their kids are also off at college. All of these kinds of resources and being able to take the time to map them, as well as all the physical resources you might have at your disposal. Maybe you've got a vehicle that you can use. Maybe your sister has an old dusty backpacking backpack that you can use to carry your things. All of these resources are important to lay out in front of you so that you know what you have to work with and also what you might need to spend some of those financial resources on. Mapping out your budget, mapping out the available resources that you have for you is going to help you determine how much of your gap time you need to work versus how much time you need to do work exchange versus how many resources you have to put towards a program that you might pay for or that might have a fee associated with it. Once you've started mapping those things out, this is where we really want to encourage you to start dreaming big, like I was talking about before. So, for all the young adults that are on this call, for the parents of the young adults, we really want to encourage that young person to take out a piece of paper, to grab a pen and pencil, to go sit in a quiet spot, maybe go on a hike by yourself or find that place that you like in the park and just sit down and start just writing. Write down all the dreams that you have right now, all the places you want to go, all the skills you'd like to learn, all the ways that you might want to travel and be in the world. And don't limit yourself. As adults, we know limitations may come later. There's just realities to budget. There's realities to places that your family will be comfortable with you going around the world. But those are not things you have to concern yourself with when you're dreaming big and you're making a brainstorming list. We want you to write down all those passion ideas that you've got. And once you've got that, post it up somewhere special to you. Post it up on your bathroom mirror or put it on the door jamb of your bedroom door so you see it every time you go out of your bedroom. And you're probably going to start noticing that some of those ideas are going to start popping out to you because you're going to see them over and over. And those are probably going to be the things that form the core foundation to your gap time. If you look in the middle column here, you'll note that these are some of the core themes that lots of gap year students might pursue during that time. And it can be everything from the arts to travel, to learning about business, to doing some kind of internship, to being involved in conservation. You can dream it and you can probably do it during your gap time. So start writing those things down and give yourself the chance to look at them, because I think you'll find that some of those anchors, those solid ideas that will form that foundation, will begin to stand out after you look at them long enough. And then finally, Kate's going to talk to you a lot about doing due diligence today, about how to do research on gap year programs. But it's important to know, because of the pandemic, most gap year age students actually didn't just get to plan their optimal gap year experience for each goal that they had. So let's say, for example, your goal was to learn Spanish or to further your knowledge of Japanese or Chinese. Let's have it be a language goal. You can't just have the optimal goal be to go pursue Spanish in Ecuador or go to Japan or go to China to study those languages, because the reality is we may not be able to do that and travel in those ways during COVID. We're just not sure what the landscape's going to look like in fall of, say, 2022. And so to that, excuse me, fall of 2021. So to that end, we need to come up with a practical plan B, a backup plan. In the case of Spanish, maybe it's actually not going all the way down to Ecuador, but perhaps you're going to Costa Rica in Central America, where people have been able to travel there for months now, and that there's an established medical system that will probably be able to manage COVID if something happened for you. That practical plan B is something that, if you have that in place, will likely serve you well if that Ecuador program that you signed up for isn't able to run. And then finally, we do encourage you to consider a plan C, something that might be more virtual or practical stay-at-home option, just in case everything fell through and you still wanted to pursue that Spanish goal. Well, great. Maybe you're taking virtual language classes online with someone who lives in Ecuador. Maybe it's not your top choice, but it still helps fulfill your goal. Coming up with plans A, the optimal plan, plan B, the practical plan, and plan C, the virtual or kind of stay-at-home plan, are going to serve you once you start planning out your gap year and looking at the gap year experiences that you're excited to pursue. I'm going to hand it over to Kate, who's going to talk to you a bit more. Thank you so much for the time tonight.
Thank you so much, Jason. And thank you, Jessica, for sponsoring this evening's event. And to Julia, too. I am just in awe to be sharing this platform with two of my colleagues. It's very exciting for me to be included with them this evening. So I just really want to thank all of you who are attending this evening and allowing us to spend some time with you as our guests tonight. And Jason did an outstanding, informative presentation. It's a great segue to why and how students and families should consider creating a personal vetting process to assess programs. So in addition to being an accredited gap year counselor, I also spend considerable time researching gap year program websites. That's often the first step for anyone interested in learning more of gap years. Hopefully, the experience I have to share with you this evening will be helpful to you as you prepare to and begin to look at websites. And I say prepare because the better prepared you are at understanding how to perform and vet and how to vet options, the more savvy you will become as in narrowing down and honing in on programs of most interest to you, because you will have established a basis for comparing programs and organizations to find the best fit. And that's the goal of gap year planning, to find the best fit for you. And Jason gave you some great tips on how you go about understanding what is best for you. So time spent in preparation will make you a smarter and better consumer, and will hopefully make for a successful and rewarding gap experience or series of experiences. As Jason said, some students do 3-4 different types of options during their gap time. There's been a steady increase of US students embarking on gap year experiences, which is now sanctioned by an increasing number of colleges and universities who are allowing deferrals. In tandem with that increase is an explosive emergence of gap year program providers. Just prior to this evening's event, I performed a simple search for such things as best gap year programs for high school students, and gap year volunteer programs, with a staggering result of 351 million hits. Can you imagine? 350 million hits. So to get a sense of how far the gap world industry has grown, by comparison, in May of 2017, when I presented a similar presentation at a GYA conference in Denver, that same search yielded about 22 million hits, which most of us in attendance at that time thought was staggering. So where, how How do you start to choose? In performing due diligence on program websites to identify programs that interim might like to share with families, which is the first step as the gatekeeper of interim's database, I allow on average 3 to 5 minutes to answer two very important key questions to me. One, how difficult or easy is it for me to find the who, the what, the where, the when, and the cost? And secondly, is that information clear, concise, compelling, and communicative? Once I've identified an option that successfully passes that initial simple test, I move on to the second and most important phase, performing due diligence to be sure a program is legitimate and trustworthy. You might consider a similar initial test with your specific 2 or 3 key questions using a finite period of time in which to find the answers. I found it to be extremely helpful in my 21 years of looking at websites. The second phase of the vetting process is much more time consuming and requires not only looking at the site, but it also demands personal phone calls or Zoom chats, as well as staff site visits. You heard that Julia has visited over 25 countries looking at sites. Keep in mind that each program type, facilitated groups, skills building intensives, internships, volunteer options, all of these types of programs require a unique subset of due diligence questions. However, they all start with my simple TLC test. For me, failing any one aspect of the TLC test sends up a red flag and most often ends my interest as a possible addition to the database. The goal in performing my TLC test is to gain a level of comfort and confidence in recommending a provider to students and families. This may serve you well. Remember, all of the answers to the questions I'm going to share with you should easily be found on a website. Familiarize yourself with these answers that you're able to identify in order to then formulate a series of clarifying questions to ask when you reach out to engage in a conversation with the provider. This will give you the opportunity to dig even deeper into what's been shared on the website. The most important component of my TLC test is transparency. Is the information provided in an honest and straightforward manner? Some of the questions that have been extremely helpful to me, and hopefully to you, may include such things as, who are the principals? Does the site provide a direct contact information, an email address other than that famous info at? Is there a telephone number? Are the principals involved in the day-to-day operations? How far removed are they from what's happening on the ground? Do they operate as a corporation? Are they an LLC or a nonprofit? Can you locate the terms and conditions? How about the cost? Is it revealed? Do they share what's included, what's not included? Are there additional costs? Most importantly, can you find the refund policy? Is the site current? When was the last time it was updated? Do the internal links work? Is that information current? Is there a comprehensive menu that directs you to the specific information you're looking for? Can you easily find the FAQs? A good set of FAQs is a sign that the program is well organized and has taken the time to provide you with good information. Now, moving on to legitimacy. When I'm looking for legitimacy, I'm looking to see if that program is reputable. Do they have a favorable standing in the experiential gap industry? Some questions here that have been very helpful to me include such things as, are they licensed to do business by any state, federal, or educational entity? Is there a board of directors and an advisory board? Is there internal governance? Is the program accredited? If so, by whom? Are they members of recognized professional organizations? If so, which? Is there operational oversight outside of the organization? What affiliations or partners have they established? Can you find favorable press? Have they conducted business under another name at any time? Online reviews can be somewhat helpful, but often can be biased. If you find negative reviews, my recommendation is that you reach out and ask for a corporate response. Understand that there are usually several sides to a bad review: the complainant side, the corporate response, and somewhere in the middle where they overlap. I often find the truth in that middle ground. Have they conducted an internal investigation into the allegation? If not, ask why. What were the results of the investigation? And be sure to ask what, if any, action or actions they have taken internally to address the complaint. For instance, have they set a new policy if warranted? When I'm moving on to competency, I now want to know about leadership skills and professionalism, experience and training. Your list might include things that I ask. Can I meet the team by reading biographies that include educational and specialized training qualifications, years of experience in the field? Can I see a photo to put a name to a face? Can I reach members of that team directly by a personal business email address or a personal phone number? Is the executive director or program leader accessible to me? How long has that business been in operation? How long has he or she worked for the organization? Where did they work previously? What qualifications are required of staff to work directly with students? And what type of training is provided to staff who work directly with students? Important, is there a code of ethics? So prior to embarking on your research of program providers, create a checklist, your own TLC test, a series of questions that are most important to you so that you can perform your own due diligence. Listen to your gut, please, and watch for those red flags. There are several very helpful resources to aid in your research that include vetting accreditation bodies committed to standards of excellence and principles and practices as guidelines for good programming. And these have stringent criteria requirements, such as the Gap Year Association, the Year Out Group, and the International Volunteer Association. And working with an accredited gap year counselor can be beneficial and helpful to your family to plan and navigate some gap time. I am hopeful that, having already heard Jason and I share our experiences, that you will find Julia's presentation informative and helpful as well. And by the end of this evening's webinar, you'll be better prepared to embark on choosing a gap year program or programs with confidence. So with your checklist in hand and your personal TLC test, I hope this experience I've shared with you has made you feel more prepared and confident to start on exploring an exploration of possibilities. I'll add a link in the chat to a blog that has most of this information that I've shared with you this evening. And I'm so excited to pass the torch to Julia and to hear her presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was, I've heard you give that presentation a couple times, and each time I'm really wowed by the expertise you bring to the table and how you've really finessed your process. And I think that it really speaks to the value that accredited gap year counselors bring to the process, because it does come down to being a research process for the family when you're deciding on what gap year program is going to be the right fit for the student, as well as maybe if there's a couple opportunities, what is going to be the most logical order of those opportunities. So now this is the last segment that we're going to go into tonight before the Q&A, but I really want to talk a little bit about the specifics now. We've kind of we started wide, and now we're into this point now where, you know, once you start thinking about what gap year program you're actually going to choose, I want you to have a really wide understanding of what goes into the actual program when we say program. So I made this diagram today to kind of talk about the different qualities of a gap year program. And then my next slide, I'm going to talk through some of the different types of gap year program. So, you know, what goes into a program structure is really the confluence of these different elements. And I think that this is also probably pretty intuitive to a lot of people, but I think it's worth saying out loud, because there are some of these nuances that come into the gap year space or experiential education space that you may not find elsewhere. So obviously, you know, Jason talked a lot about the what is your why portion of planning, which is really the brainstorming and thinking about what you want out of this period of time. And you really want a gap year program to support the activities or the themes that a student is aiming to check off of their list. So thinking about what a program is offering, step by step, is there a particular focus? Is it a multi-focus program? And really one of the things I wanted to highlight about this particular aspect of it is that it is okay if a student is moving towards a program that maybe say they do 6 different things and the student is only excited about 4 of them. That's still a pretty good ratio. And we want to ask questions about those extra 2 things and see if it's a complete deal breaker. But those could also be things that are a little bit of a comfort zone stretch, which is one of the things we want to see out of gap time, is that student pushing themselves, trying new things, and making sure that they don't, throw out an experience just because of one aspect of it that may be not as intriguing as the other parts. So we definitely want to look at the whole and also the sum. And then we also want to think about the social structure of a program. Now, I've kind of broken it down to 3 elements: a cohort structure, a group structure, and independent. So a cohort structure, in my definition, means that they're moving through a program with the same group of peers. Usually it's around the same age. So typically in the gap year space, that's 17 to 25 years old, more or less. Usually it's weighted a little bit more down into the kind of 17 to 21-year-old age range. Cohort-based programs offer that really cohesive, social experience where they're going to be building those bonds, going through similar experiences with that group. And there's some benefits to obviously having that really tight-knit social network. Now, group program, I like making a little bit of a distinction here because there are programs where you're with other young people, which is what a lot of gap year students want out of an opportunity. But you're not necessarily with the same people. This could be a volunteer program or an internship program where people are kind of coming and going at different times and staying different lengths. So still social, still offers a lot of the benefits of having other people around, but is not quite the same as having the same people there the whole time you are. And then there's a more independent experience. This could mean that a student is doing something very individualized, where they might be the only person doing something of that type, or the only person in a community doing that work. Or they might be, it might just be a type of opportunity where it's not guaranteed that they're going to be with a group of other young people or gap year students. So thinking about where the comfort level of that student is with their social needs. I know that this year, a lot of students really want to be with other people, and that's completely understandable. We've all spent way too much time with ourselves. So thinking about, if they feel strongly about one way or the other and what the program is going to offer them. Another big component to a gap year opportunity is what kind of support and mentorship does it offer? Kate touched on this when she was talking about vetting programs. What are they offering as far as the actual structure and support on program? So some programs have a lot of this. Some programs offer leaders who are there with the students more or less all of the time to help them and coach them and be a sounding board for those students. Other programs or even work opportunities have more of a hierarchical approach, where it's more of a boss or a leader that is in charge of kind of tasking the student with various tasks. That's a much different role than a program leader that is acting as a mentor. So thinking about where a student might want to be on that front. And then, obviously encompassing all of these things in the overall structure of gap time is the overall cost. And I know that's a big factor for a lot of families. And so when you're thinking about what to invest in a gap year program, you really want to think about the return on that investment. And obviously, when we're talking about gap year opportunities, it's not always a straight line as to what that return on the investment is. One of the things I always like to tell families is if a student, for example, is in a position where if you sent them straight to college, they are not set up to thrive. Maybe that's because they're burnt out from academics. Maybe that's because they're not ready for college. Maybe that's because college, four-year college is not the right move for them right after high school. If any of those scenarios are the case for a particular student, then sending them to college right away is going to be a waste of time and money. So how can you reinvest that time and money into a really worthwhile gap year opportunity that's going to produce a more mature, more prepared, student with a better perspective on what they want out of their higher education, out of life? And we know from gap year statistics that gap year students are better prepared for those next steps after their gap time. So whatever that dollar sign is of the, what you were prepared to invest in your gap time, thinking about it as an investment is a really worthwhile way of thinking about it. So now I want to spend a little bit of time going through a lot of information. So I'm going to, do my best to cruise through these different types of gap year opportunities. And I wanted to make the caveat here that all of the things you're going to see in this slide are programs. And I know that the theme tonight is how to choose a gap year program. What I decided not to include on this slide is the other things that you can do that are wonderful ways to spend gap time that we're just not going to spend time on tonight. Those things could include personal projects. They could include the types of things Jason talked about, where you go and stay with a family member and work. It's anything that's kind of independent of a particular program. So let's just kind of know that all of those things are available, and they just have a different research process and different planning process attached to them. So with that said, we're also going to talk about some of these things seem very similar on the surface, but there are nuances to kind of consider when you're comparing and contrasting them in your own research. So again, because this is a lot of information, I want you to remember the things that we have already said, that my colleagues have already said before, about focusing on the individual's goals, wants, needs for their gap time, and then also the trust and the research that you will be doing in whatever program you choose to do, or whatever program you choose to send your child on. So the first category, a wider category, is experiential programs. These tend to be cohort-based programs, so same group of students, but there's two kind of subcategories of this type of experience. Some are more outdoor focused, meaning that you're building skills that are outdoor adventure related, like you're hiking, like you're whitewater rafting, you might be scuba diving or surfing, accumulating outdoor experiences. And by doing those things, you're also developing personal leadership skills, communication skills, you're having a peer-based experience. Sometimes you're able to travel to usually you're able to travel to some really cool places to do these things, because they're available, these kinds of programs are available in the United States as well as all over the world. These programs tend to be set length in time as well, anywhere from a couple weeks to months long in length. Similarly, experiential programs that are culturally focused tend to look a little bit more at language, cultural competency, service learning through service projects and communities, and other aspects that just have a different focus to work on that personal leadership and communication skills, and some of the same benefits that you get out of it. So if you or your child are really into outdoors and using and being physical, then an outdoor focused program is a great way to gain new skills while also gaining just a lot of perspective on yourself and the world around you. If you're interested in learning a language on your gap time, or experiencing new communities in a setting that allows you to learn and grow with a peer group, then perhaps the cultural experiences are going to be a little bit more up your alley. Same thing, where they're kind of set length of time. So these programs tend to be on the more expensive side because they are more supported, and kind of are usually more all-inclusive as far as what the price tag includes. A lot of them also offer college credit, which can be very valuable to families if you are either using 529 money to pay for them, or if you are utilizing that, trying to transfer that credit to put towards higher ed. So with volunteer programs, there are many, many ways to volunteer in your gap time. We could actually spend a whole session on volunteering. And you can work in education, community development, disaster relief, conservation projects, wildlife projects, coaching. So if a student really wants to give back to a community, whether it's close to home or around the world, looking at a volunteer program is a really great way for them to develop some skills while also contributing positively to a community. The main difference when thinking about gap year programs in this category is that there is a real distinction between some larger organizations that offer a little bit more logistic support in the form of a head office. These we usually call sending organizations. And then there's another type of category where you're actually going directly to the source of wherever you're going to volunteer, and that's called grassroots volunteering. The main difference between these programs, well, there's a couple differences, but grassroots volunteering tends to be less expensive or sometimes even free because you are going directly to the source of the volunteer opportunity. For example, you are finding the school in Costa Rica to go volunteer at, or you are looking for the nature reserve in South Africa to go volunteer at. A sending organization is the kind of organization that if you Google gap year volunteering and it comes up and they offer many different countries or many different projects, and they have people on staff who know about all those projects and help connect you with them and help with you with your travel logistics and airport pickups and things like that in country. So because you're getting a little bit more support, the price is going to be a little bit higher for those programs. Sometimes those kinds of programs also offer weekend excursions and things like that. You know, for families who don't have a lot of experience traveling internationally, going with an organization that offers a little bit more of that support and where you know someone's going to be picking you up from the airport can be a worthwhile benefit. But you also want to be careful of sending organizations because you want to make sure that you're going with one that is ethical, that where you know and where they know exactly what's going on the ground, to Kate's point, and where you know your money is going to be put to good use. So if you're going to be volunteering internationally, you definitely want to pay attention to the role you're going to be playing and the role that the organization plays in the work that's being done on the ground. Both of these opportunities are you know, can be very, very affordable. So just, you know, you can know that moving forward as well. On the bottom here, we have internship programs, which differing from the type of internship that you might get by applying directly or getting something through a family friend or something like that, they're actually internship programs that can help place you in an industry that's interesting to you. And typically, this is a matchmaking process where you apply to the internship program, you tell them what industries you're interested in, and they actually help make a match. And they also usually provide housing and other types of logistical support as well. Typically, these programs also have a small cohort or sometimes larger cohorts that you get to live with and socialize with, even though everyone might be going off to their own individualized internship every day. So those programs are great for students who want some pre-professional experience, and they are a little bit more independent. You have to get up on your own, get out of the house, and go to your internship. So for students who have that ability to be more independent, or put it at the second half of the year after maybe something that's a little bit more structured, that can be a great way to gain some career experience. National service opportunities are something that I feel like we really always need to highlight when we talk about gap year opportunities. The biggest gap year program provider in the United States is AmeriCorps. So these programs like City Year, NCCC, FEMA Corps, these are all opportunities that are open to high school graduates. There are even more that I can't even tell you about in the limited time that I have that would be also eligible for 18-year-old high school graduates. So the plus side of these programs is they tend to be pretty structured. You tend to be pretty busy with whatever program you choose. They are fully funded, meaning you get a stipend while you're doing them and an education award at the end of your service that you can put towards higher ed. And if you're interested in volunteering domestically, it is such a fantastic way to gain all those skills while serving in your own country. So such a great thing to think about for gap time. Time commitment wise, most of these opportunities range between 6 and 10 months in length. Now for courses, these tend to be programs that are very specific to Jason's point earlier about if you have like a specific interest that you really want to build on. There is probably a course for that. You can go and learn how to build boats in Maine. You can learn how to surf in Indonesia. You can learn how to blow glass in Italy. I mean, there is just something out there for everyone. These tend to be shorter in length unless they are a certificate program or something that's longer. Tends to be a little bit more variety in ages. Sometimes there's gap year students. Sometimes you might see someone who's taking career break or who is a retirement age also learning how to build a boat, because why not? So you socially, you have to be a little bit more open to learning and interacting with people outside of your strict age range, which when I talk to people about it after the fact, they tend to be actually really happy with learning from people that aren't their exact age. So keep that in mind. And yeah, think about courses as an option for a more structured opportunity, sometimes requiring independent living, but the opportunity is usually pretty structured and then can be kind of slotted into different parts of your year depending on what makes sense in the context of the other things that you're doing. Lastly, there's work exchange and work placement programs. So if you want to get a job and earn money on your gap year, but you don't want to live at home, there are actually programs where you can go and, live in Martha's Vineyard and work at a hotel, or go work at a ski resort and live in a ski town. There are a lot of ways that you can actually get a work placement, meaning housing and a job, through either placement companies or individual headhunting organizations. You can also do this on your own, but these organizations tend to kind of bundle young people together in dorm type housing and things like that, which can be really useful. And in normal times, gap year students are also eligible to work abroad in New Zealand and Australia. So if there are any sophomores or juniors in the audience, that will probably be an option for you down the line. I don't know about this coming year though. So with the other type of work exchange is something that some of you may have heard about, something like woofing or workaway. These are more like platforms. They're not quite programs, but I think it's worthwhile to say because they are very affordable, similar to these work placement options where you earn money. A work exchange option is actually exactly what it sounds like. You're working you're in exchange for your labor, you're getting room and board. So it's a great way to travel cheaply in places where you're not eligible for a work visa. So Europe, Central and South America, even in our own country, there's some really, really cool placements where you can work on farms, work at a bed and breakfast, work on a boat. I've done some of these in other countries, and I think that Jay and Kate have also visited programs like this, and they're really, really neat opportunities, and again, very cost effective, also more independent and usually individual. So it's a good thing to think about when it comes to social structure. Sometimes when you're saving money, that also means that there's not always a structure in place to give you the social interactions on a silver platter. So you have to be okay with that trade-off. So this is a lot of information to take in. I think that the bottom line to know is that when you're looking at gap year programs, you really have to ask yourself what you're really going back to that core question. What is your why? What are your goals, and what opportunities are going to best support you within the structure that makes sense for your personality and what you need out of your gap time? And remembering that you could do multiple things over the course of your gap year, and we all recommend that you start with more structure, move towards more independence, or sometimes geographic distance if that's an interesting challenge for you as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Jessica because I've probably produced a lot of questions.
Thank you so much, Julia and Jason and Kate and all of the rest of you there in the audience for being with us today. We are transitioning now into the portion of the evening that's reserved for Q&A, but we don't have any open questions so far. I do see that one attendee has their hand raised, so I'll just remind everyone that if you do have a question, you're welcome to submit it at any point through the Q&A box that's there at the bottom of your menu. I'll give everyone a moment to submit questions as they think of them, but in the meantime, I'll just remind you all that we do have several different crash course events coming up, as well as a fair, a gap year fair, this Saturday. So if anyone would like to join us on Saturday or at any of the gap year fair events, we'd love to see you live. I'm going to go ahead and put the link for the fair in the chat one more time. All right, so it looks like we do have one question coming in directed at Julia saying, you mentioned COVID, how are programs staying safe with students? So I'll let Julia jump in there.
Yeah, and I would love for either Jason or Kate to jump in on this too, because this is something that we're all paying very close attention to. But a lot of these programs, and I'll focus on the experiential program side of things because those have been the most successful at being able to run in the context of COVID. And what they're doing is a testing and podding protocol. So if a program, say it's an outdoor focused program that spends time in Wyoming, what they're doing is they're taking the whole cohort of 10 people, they're asking them to pre-quarantine and test ahead of travel. They arrive, they practice social distancing with masks while they're all kind of getting oriented. Usually 5 to 7 days into the program, the whole cohort gets tested again. And then assuming everybody's negative, they're kind of able to take off their masks and they are essentially a pod. That is what a lot of these gap year programs are doing this year to much success. A lot of these programs are able to run in places like Ireland and Costa Rica, the Bahamas, even South Africa. So there are a lot of programs that are doing those kinds of things. For some programs who are based in urban settings, it's not always practical to have a strict pod. So they have other kinds of testing protocols to do periodic testing or batch testing of their participants and things like that. to keep the participants as safe as possible. And geographic wise, we are paying attention because it's kind of shifting sands. Sometimes you're allowed into a place, sometimes you're not. Programs are trying to adapt and pivot to that. Jason, Kate, what would you add to the COVID conversation? We could chat all night about it.
Well, one of the things I thought was really interesting that occurred this last year is in the spring, when many gap year programs had to bring their students home, there was a lot of conversation moving well into the summer and the early fall about what other programmatic strategies might help support students being much more insulated from COVID. And so one of the things that happened, of course, was that much of the programming moved to being domestic US-based programming. We are seeing more international destinations open up, but there has been just an incredible rise in the American gap year experience. So we're very fortunate now to have a wide variety of programs being offered right here in the US. The other thing we've seen is that program models have changed. So we're seeing some shorter based program models that are starting a little later in the fall, some program models that are starting a little later in the winter. So we're seeing new timelines as well as just a greater variety of program options being offered, which is all good news for you all.
Thanks so much for chiming in there. Kate, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, what I'd like to add is, to really congratulate the program providers themselves. They really, really stepped up with creating these wonderful COVID protocols. And what I thought was especially transparent is that they worked extremely hard with their risk management teams. And if they didn't think that they could keep students safe, their staff safe, or the local community where they were bringing students, they chose not to run the program. And even though that might have created some hardship on the ends of gap year counselors who had placed students and now were scrambling to find more, it was a testament to the integrity of the gap world. And I believe Jason and Julia may also have worked on protocols for COVID with the GYA. So, kudos to that group as well.
Thanks for chiming in with that, Kate. I just want to add for everybody, as Julia said, we could really spend all evening talking about COVID. So if you would like to join us for exactly that, we have an event scheduled on March 22nd. It is included within this gap year crash course, so you will receive the sign-in link because you're all clearly already ready for registered for the crash course. So join us on March 22nd for Gap Year 101, Gapping in the COVID Era, where we'll specifically address that topic at length. I see another list question here that I'm going to address just really quickly, asking for a list of actual programs. Once you're clear on your filters, how do you apply them and start your search? So I'm about to share the 2021 Gap Year Program Guide that we've produced. I just dropped it in the chat as a link to a downloadable PDF, which you can use to explore all of our participating programs. These programs are also all eligible for the Gap Year Scholarship that we're offering as well. This is a great place to start your search. And of course, we'd also recommend that you attend a USA Gap Year Fair in order to meet these programs in person. Moving on, we have an attendee asking, is there a place where we can find lists of these various programs such as woofing, etc.? I know about the Gap Year Fair main companies, but looking to branch out to find other programs more off the radar. This is where I'm going to go ahead and recommend Go Overseas again. Like I said, we're like a Yelp for these meaningful travel programs. So we don't operate any programs ourselves, but we're a resource where you can browse verified alumni reviews, look through articles and guides, and really explore what programs are out there and what programs are available. Going to direct this question here to Jason, because I know that you've answered this one before, even while we've been on a call together. Jason, is it possible to take a gap year if this person is a freshman in college? What do you think?
Thank you, Jessica. And it's a great question. It's absolutely possible to take a gap year while one is in college. I'm sure that each Kate and Julia are probably working with folks who are in college right now, as Jane and I am as well. This is a challenging time for students to be in school, whether it's due to COVID or just kind of the upheaval of higher education. And we're finding that many college students are looking to take this time to apply all this amazing book learning they've done to real world experiences. So gap year programs, as both Kate and Julia talked about, are generally open to students who are of the age of kind of high school graduation, 17 or 18 years old, up to folks who are maybe 22. And then many of the volunteer or internship experiences or work exchange options are open to folks 18 and up. So there are lots of options for that student who is 19, 20, 21 that are out there, and that will absolutely help support the studies that you go back to once you return to college. I myself took gap time during college, and I'm very glad I did that. It really brought my studies to life, and it really helped me define what my major was going to be once I returned to school.
Absolutely. I think there's really no wrong time in your life to take a gap year, but we're certainly seeing more college students considering that option due to COVID. I'll reiterate that our scholarship is open for anyone ages 14 to 25. And in that digital guide, which I just dropped the link to in the chat, we have the list of programs with each of them, their accepted age range in the top left-hand corner. So if you are above that typical gap year age, do feel free to scroll through and see which programs might be eligible and accepting of you. This next question I'm going to direct towards Kate. It's asking about college deferrals. Says, please speak to the current trends or even rumors concerning college deferrals. Does COVID have a significant effect on colleges allowing deferrals? Oh, Kate, you're muted here. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Kate, we can't hear you. There we go.
How's that? Yeah. So yeah, there's been a lot of conversation about this, what's happening with the deferral. So colleges, and I think my colleagues may have a better sense of it, especially Julia, because I think she addressed this at a meeting last week. There's a huge influx of students applying to colleges this year. So even during COVID, what happened was if colleges typically had a 10% of their incoming freshmen that they would allow the deferrals for, because of COVID, they expanded those percentages. So there was a huge influx of students who would otherwise have been incoming freshmen who took a gap. So now all of those gap students from last year have places in the universities starting in the fall. You have a no influx of the high school graduates. So I'm not quite sure where the universities are going to fall on that deferral. It seems to me that the percentages would be high because they don't have space. So I think the opportunity to take a deferral this year, it would probably be equal to what it was last year. But again, I think the main thing you should do is look at the colleges you've applied to, see what their deferral policies are. That information comes best from each individual university, even to see if they would allow a deferral for a gap.
Thank you for that insight, Kate. And Julia and Jason, if you have anything you'd like to add, do feel free to hop in here.
I would just say that, don't feel shy about calling the admissions office. Once you are accepted into an institution, the ball is in your court. So call up, ask what their deferral policy is, and if there is a deadline, get your deferral request in as soon as possible would be my advice this year, just because we kind of don't know what the colleges are going to do down the line. Could be just as generous as last year, or they may adjust things. So definitely, keep an eye on the institutions that you're looking at and make sure that you know when each of the deadlines are.
Great, thank you for that addition there. One last question, which I'm going to go ahead and open up just to the group. I know that this is a really common question, so I'm sure we'll have a range of answers here. What sort of programs are recommended for students who have some sort of mental health issues and need more supervision? Maybe if Jason wants to start on that, you can start there, and anyone else who wants to add is welcome to.
Well, depending upon the diagnosis and the level of support that a student needs, there are actually quite a few options available within the gap year space. So if a student has a diagnosis of, say, ADD or ADHD or general anxiety, many gap year programs, while they're not focused directly on supporting that need, or the program structure is not directly focused on students building coping skill sets and mechanisms, they actually offer that anyway, because these programs are about young adults feeling empowered, taking on more leadership roles, building responsible habits that are going to help them be successful. The programs themselves actually tend to meet that need in many ways for students. And so we find that a lot of students who fall within diagnoses of those categories really thrive within gap year programs. There are also a couple of different gap year programs that are designated for and help to support specific diagnoses, such as ADD or ADHD. And so you could Google, gap year program for students with ADHD, and there's going to be a couple of those out there that you'll find. For students who have more significant mental health challenges, they need to see a professional weekly or daily. They feel like they would thrive in a therapeutic environment. There are quite a few different therapeutic-based programs that are out there. The gap year space is not a therapeutic space, but there is an entire different world of programming out there for students who do need that higher level of support. And so you could always reach out to any of the three of us and we can point you in the right direction if those are the needs that your student has.
Thanks so much for that answer, Jason. I'll allow Julia and Kate an opportunity to hop in, but if not, we'll wrap it up as I know we're hitting our time here.
I think Jason did a great job. I don't have anything to add.
All right, thanks, Julia. Oh,
I think Jason covered it all. Thanks, Jason.
Excellent. All right, in that case, we'll move on to our very final slide as we say goodbye here. I did see one last question come in, but I can go ahead and field that. Someone asking, if I didn't find a program that I liked, can I take a gap year independently and apply for the scholarship? Absolutely. I will say that it says that within our terms and conditions that you do need to be participating with one of our participating programs. But there's kind of a caveat loophole in that you can work with one of our gap year counselors, and that counts as working with one of our participating programs. And also mentorship with one of our gap year counselors is included within the gap year scholarship. So it's kind of all encompassed there. What we would ask for someone who's interested in working independently is that you submit to us a proposal of how exactly you'd like to spend your gap time, how you would make it meaningful, and how you would spend that money from the scholarship in order to plan your perfect gap year. So we're definitely open to it. We just ask for that additional step of really writing us a compelling proposal there. Thank you so much for those questions. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link for the scholarship one more time. As it says on the screen, the deadline is April 15th. It's open to all US citizens between the ages of 14 and 25. So we have no school requirements, no grade requirements, no specific program requirements. We really just want to support someone in going out and having the gap year of their dreams. So if you have any questions, do feel free to reach out to us after the event. I really do hope that you'll join us at one of our other upcoming events. As I said, we really, really recommend that you attend a fair in addition to these crash course sessions, because it's just such a great opportunity to connect with programs and learn even more about gap year opportunities. And in addition to that, as I said, we're also offering an extra credit point to anyone who applies for the scholarship if we can check our records and see that you've attended a fair live as well. So we really do hope to see you there. If you have any questions, do feel free to follow up with us by email after the event, and we hope to see you all at another event in the future. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Julia, and thank you, Jason. Have a great evening.